there are Reddit articles and there's other articles where people are like, well, I don't get any value out of it or anything like that. But it really is like, if you're not doing the work that you guys are essentially telling us to do, well, yeah, you're not going to get any value out of it. Title now that I have a new job, is a CRM specialist. So not technically, it doesn't technically say Salesforce admin on there, but it's a Salesforce admin job.
What is it about a Salesforce career where you feel like it is a long-term play for you, that it's more than just another role that you're doing until the company needs you to do something else?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question because I haven't really thought about that. I think what really drew me to Salesforce to begin with, like moving from accounting, which I fell into accidentally as well. I was going to school for art, and then for me it was like, I just need a job that's going to help me pay for college, which I don't use. I was doing accounting for 14 years, and now this is something so new, um, that I'm like, it's exciting, right? It's so new. You get to help people find things or fix things, or changes within the system. Where in accounting, I mean, it's like, it's math, right? There's always going to be one answer and that's it. And there isn't really, technically, yes, you can do it in different ways, but at the end of the day, it's got to be specific to how businesses are submitting for IRS stuff. And in Salesforce you don't have to do that, right? And you're not stuck waiting. You don't have like a really short month end period. There's no well, there are regulations, but not regulations that are heavy like they are in accounting. So I think
Yeah.
that's really drew me into it, especially after being in accounting for 14 years. That, was really nice to be like, oh, this is so new and I can do something completely different and it's fun.
Yeah, I don't know what our deal is, but we really like helping each other. There's like it's a there's something about it where it's almost like if there's a string attached, the community is going to get you in trouble. Like we have each
Yeah.
other's back. Like you gotta, it really is just like a very giving place. And I think there are plenty of people that are do not fit that culture.
Mhm.
But they're just not active in the community because it would be a very uncomfortable place for them. So, so yeah, I think the Salesforce community really attracts those people to be the most, I think, voiced or active, or the people who really just want to help each other. And it's fun though, like when you get to help people, like you were just mentioning, um, like you actually get to problem solve and be creative. And I think you said you were going to school for art, and
Mhm.
I imagine that accounting versus Salesforce solutioning, yes, it's not art at its core, but it's way more creative. And you can sort of take these ideas and think creatively about how you could solve that. And I think the really
Mhm.
cool thing that I've enjoyed is that, yeah, you can go to the community and you can read the forums and you can go to the knowledge articles, but at the end of the day, your brain might come up with the new best way to handle that situation that's never been thought of before, which is really cool. And it doesn't have to be best for every other company. It might just be the best fit for that lady you work with in that department, or that guy that works over there. And it's just a really good fit for them and who they are. So
Mhm.
I think that's fun that we get to be super creative with the way that we work and the way that we solve. And it's not so you're right or you were wrong.
Yeah, yeah, that's genuinely the best part. There's no right or wrong way of doing something in Salesforce.
What was your biggest reservation, concern, whatever you want to call it, with, why most people are not just like, oh, Talent Stacker's available, I think I'll swipe a credit card here, right? Like there's some thought that goes into this. So
Yeah.
what was the thought that went into it for you? Like what was it that you were hoping to achieve, but maybe not sure, this was the right fit, but hopefully surprised by the result that you ended up with. Yeah, what was your biggest concern coming into this?
Just to be super frank about it, I
Yeah.
think the price point.
Yeah.
After, specifically, I spoke to one talent stacker. I reached out to her. I never talked to this lady before. I reached out to her. She was so nice to the point where like we now talk to each other pretty regularly about stuff in, Salesforce or how we're doing. She even like she gave me a cake recipe the other day that her and her sister were making. So when I was kind of on the, should I not? It is a lot of money. I had just been recently laid off. And so, you go from like, okay, well, it's a lot of money and you're not working, and, there's a lot of things that are going into play here. And after talking to her, she made it, I don't know, she just was like, just do it. It's fantastic the experience that you get from whether it be the actual project or the community or just all the resources that you guys have. She said, just do it. There are Reddit articles and there's other articles where people are like, well, I don't get any value out of it or anything like that. But it really is like if you're not doing the work that you guys are essentially telling us to do, well, yeah, you're not going to get any value out of it,
Yeah.
So I want to say one cohort behind her, which she was like, oh, we can be we can be in the same cohort together, but I was one behind her. And so as she was going through her experience project, she was kind of giving me, like key pointers on like, this might be something you might expect, or this might be something that, might happen. And now, we're doing other projects together, like in the clicked, I think it's the AI data stuff. So we're actually partners in a totally different project now. But it's fantastic because this is again someone I've never met. I literally was like, I'm gonna just take a chance. I see she's in the talent stacker program. I'm gonna message her, and she's been, um, super helpful and almost like a mentor getting into talent stacker, which is fantastic. And I've made some really awesome friends through talent stacker so far. So at that point, like after I had already kind of like swept the card, I was like, okay, this was a no-brainer. At this point, it's a no-brainer. There's so many amazing people in here, and I get to work with them. And I've already worked with them, or I'm going to, in the future. So yeah.
I love that so much. That the community is definitely my favorite part. It wasn't always, I think like it had to become what it is. I don't think we made it what it is. I think it became what it is. And of course we influenced that, but I don't think we influenced it like methodically. We influenced it by just being around and hanging out, and good people came around, and it was really, really cool to watch that come to be. So I love that story. And yeah, you get to spend time together with people at a personal level and a business level. And it's interesting because you're right. And I was talking to somebody earlier this week, and they were saying that the community was, probably the biggest impact for them was just being surrounded by the encouragement
Mhm.
and then just the real, like, yeah, the little things like, man, I'm feeling down, and they can pick you back up. But then also like, hey, I'm struggling with this concept for an exam, and they can help you out there. Or even once you get on the job, that it's like, man, I'm having this issue at work, and it's like, yeah, I can help you out there. And there's almost always somebody to come in and say, yeah, I've been there. And to your point, being just one cohort ahead, right?
Mhm.
I always try to tell people, because we have the Trailblazer mentorship platform. And I'll say the biggest thing that we come up against is people not feeling confident to be mentors. And I try to tell people that a mentor is not 10x certified. A mentor is not 5 years in. A
Mhm.
mentor could still not have a job yet and mentor someone who's earlier on. All that matters is that they're a step ahead. And
Mhm.
to me, that's almost the most meaningful mentorship. Is like, I don't necessarily want to hear from a 20x certified technical architect MVP when I'm trying to land my first job. I want to hear from the person who landed a job 3 months ago, and they can tell me like what the step looks like that I'm about to step on, and how I can step on it more effectively than they did. How did the program benefit you, the steps through the process? Like, of course, the community, you mentioned that, having those people to bounce ideas off of or be mentored by. Did you see benefit from, say, things like um, cert prep, interview prep, LinkedIn networking, those kind of things, experience project? Like, were those things that you saw pay dividends for you throughout the, application, interview,
Mm.
job landing process?
Being able to put all of those things that I had already put into place, not that I hadn't already done projects, but this was my first group project,
Mm.
period, right? Like I haven't done a group project since college. And so for me, it was
Mm.
like, how is this going to go? I have to work with three other, folks. And are we going to be able to work together seamlessly? And like, I couldn't have asked for a better group. Um, the three guys that I was working with, they were super helpful. They got to a point where they were asking me, how do you do stuff in there? Because they were all fresh into Salesforce. They never had a Salesforce job. And then we had one gentleman who has been, I think he has said like 20 plus years in IT and doing project management. He brought an entire different like perspective on how to do things in there versus like how I did them. And so it was nice to get their perspective on it. And I think that was the biggest takeaway, even though it is, I think it was 5 weeks. Even though it was a 5 week, journey, right? Because it's not just a project, it's a journey. You're having these multi-week kind of get-togethers with your cohort, and then also with the instructor. They're not really instructors, right? Like
We call them
they're
project managers. Yeah.
yeah, but they're more than just that, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
they're more than just that. We had Josie. She was more than just that, at least for us. And so she was very helpful in every aspect. We get to a point where like we're stuck. And there's all these other things. And she's literally working already as a Salesforce admin,
Hmm.
and so we can be like, okay, well, what if we do it like this? And she's like, well, what if you do it this way? Like just slightly different, and being able to get that kind of feedback, one, not only in a group setting, but like almost real world setting, right? We came out and we were able to provide a practically fully fleshed project, that we can put on our portfolio, which to me is like, that's gold, right?
Yeah.
If anyone's going to look at your stuff when you're interviewing, they're going to look at what you've already done. And they're going to see that, one, you made this from scratch, there's nothing in there. Two, you were able to work with other people, and not
Hmm.
just other people. These guys were, across the country. One was in Canada. So we not only had to work with other people that we'd never met, we have to figure out, good times that we could all work together, and then, divvy up the work we had. And it was so seamless that it was just like, it was fantastic. It was fantastic. So for that alone, I would sign up and pay for a talent stacker over and over again.
Those experience projects are, it's man, it's a theme. It's the same thing with the community. It's like the thing is we allow, because you're adults, right? And you can take a back seat, and you could choose to not show up, or show up and stay cam off, mic off, and chime in with a yeah or I agree every now and then. And you would get a very different experience out of that project.
Right.
And that happens sometimes, right? People will say like, oh, the experience project, like I don't even know what the value was. And it's like, yeah, because the value is what you put into it. And to your
Mhm.
point, you could allow the fact that people are spread out over multiple time zones be the reason why you get frustrated and say that, I shouldn't have to deal with this. But, I could agree with you. I could say, that is frustrating. But then the reality is, after 15 years of Salesforce consulting, I have groups that I work with consistently, like in Australia, where I literally can't even meet with them on the phone. We have to be asynchronous. We have to send video clips to each other to ask questions,
Mhm.
because the time is so off. And so if we are preparing you guys in a way that allows you to deal with some of the frustrations of the real world, then it's simply if you lean in and you overcome those challenges, then you will overcome those challenges in your job and you'll be able to talk about overcoming those challenges in your interviews. And I think if you allow those challenges to be frustrations, then you're going to have one experience. But if you allow those challenges to be things that you try to overcome, then you're going to have a very different experience. And obviously, you're a walking result of taking challenges as things you can overcome, and you end up
Yeah.
where you end up.
Yeah. Speaking
So, yeah, go
speaking
ahead.
really quickly, speaking of interviews, because you reminded me, it was a question I did have in an interview. Like,
Mm,
what are projects you're currently working on? And I was at the last portion of the experience project specifically for the job that
mm,
I was offered. How do you work with people? What is it like when, maybe it's something that you don't want to do, or like that typical question that
hmm
did come up, and I did use the experience project and like my I guess view on it for
yeah.
the interview, and they loved it so much. They were like, oh, this that sounds really interesting, or that's pretty cool, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there. I always refer to the program because I believe I look at it this way, and maybe it just works for my imagination. But I think of landing any job, but Salesforce is what I've like dedicated my career to. It is a puzzle, and you're putting these pieces together, and you've got like your background, and that can be a big part of the puzzle. Like I was a stay-at-home parent, and these are the skills I developed and the challenges that I overcame. And that can be like a whole like 30-year puzzle, could be all the skills and challenges you've overcome from that. But you start plugging in these little pieces like admin certification or some trailhead, and those kind of fit in the corner. And then
Right.
you start plugging in things like the experience project. And the experience project itself might just be like one or two pieces in the bottom corner. But then when you layer it onto telling a story about challenges that you've overcome, suddenly it becomes a bigger part of the puzzle. And then when you get that perfect situation in the interview, right, where they say, tell me about a project, and you just happen to be in the
Currently.
middle of the
Yeah.
project and you're facing a challenge and you don't even have to make something up. You get to
Mhm.
talk about a real scenario. And that is a huge difference between now you're just like flooding the puzzle with pieces. And the thing about that is that like if you're truly entry level and you're not in talent stacker, you can't possibly, I mean, maybe you could in some offhand scenarios, but majority speaking, you're just not possibly going to be in that best case situation where you're in the middle of an experience project with four people across the globe and
Mhm.
working through these challenges. Do you mind telling us, and you've hinted at this throughout, but do you mind taking us through maybe like the high level version of job application to job offer? I think a lot of people like to envision that process and they're putting in a lot of applications, but they're not seeing the next steps unfold. So, do you
Yeah.
mind taking us through that for you? Like, what was that like for you? Like, you're putting in application after application. How do we get job
It was,
offer?
I will say, the ones where you just kind of like easy apply, they're a hard no.
Mm-hmm.
Half the time they just kind of glance over them, if they glance over them, right? I think they're now using, AI stuff to kind of read through the resume, which is unfortunate, but it happens and it's going to continue to happen. Some of the interviews that I have had in the last couple of months that didn't include this specific job were because, someone recommended me, or they saw that I posted like a response to their, I'm looking for someone, please apply. I've had multiple of those. This specific job, I'm looking through their site and I see CRM specialist on there. And as you're reading through it, it clearly states, because CRM, it's not just Salesforce. There are other CRM applications, but this one was specifically to Salesforce. And here I was like firing off phone calls, emails, like, hey, I'm still here. Are you, looking for someone? Is this still available? And I think at that point, because it was one, local to my area, and two, I was actively going and searching for these, titles that don't specifically say Salesforce admin or Salesforce, and then whatever you want to add to it, right? Like CRM specialists, no one applied to their job. They
Mm,
actually had a job posting on LinkedIn, and they said they received zero responses for CRM specialists, right?
wow.
And I know on your site, on the resources, and even in the podcast, right? It says maybe not necessarily apply for Salesforce admin, but look for these other jobs that are similar, they just have a different title. And that's
Yep.
exactly what I did. And that's where we are now.
Yeah, I love that. No, we actually now on the Talent Stacker LinkedIn page, and I'll say I always repost it on my personal LinkedIn and share it. I think I did this yesterday. I love these posts. So what we do is every month we look at everyone who landed a job and we take their job titles and we
Mm-hmm.
compile those and we make a list of the most popular to the least popular. But the thing is, if like people are landing these jobs, then they're all meaningful job
Right.
titles. And we've seen variations. Like we've seen, 20 people in a month land a job in 10 different titles. Right. And it's like, okay, so to your point, you cannot search Salesforce admin. Like you should, but you
Yeah.
got to keep going. That's not the end, that's the beginning. And there we've seen so many like CRM specialist, support specialist, roles like that, or like a lot of specialist stuff, revenue operations, sales operations, but they all end up being Salesforce specifically, automating processes, reports and dashboards, like data cleanliness, all these kind of things. And I'll say that it's one of the least engaged with posts that we put out each month. And I think
Yeah.
it's probably one of the most vital topics. So hopefully people will see it and they'll hear more and more people like you talk about it. And it is important. And the reason for that shift, a big reason for that shift is that historically consultancies have been the major hiring companies and
Mm-hmm.
they have standardized naming. So they always are associate consultant, Salesforce admin, Salesforce developer, Salesforce business analyst, and they use that really standardized naming convention. But
Mm-hmm.
over the last 2 years, the shift has been that now more of the customers, the Salesforce customers, are doing the hiring, and they don't have that standardized naming across the board. So they have the craziest names for it internally at their company. And to
Right.
your point, you're a CRM specialist, but we would know you as a Salesforce administrator, but they don't know you as that. And that's okay. But it's interesting because you have to look at what the companies would be calling this role internally, not just at what we call it as
Mhm.
people that are Salesforce in the know sort of thing. Do you get the feeling that your company that hired you, or the companies that you were being interviewed by, do they sound like they're more in sort of that fear state of like frozen and trying to make really crisp decisions? Or are they leaning more towards growth? Do you have any like indication of if they feel like they're in like expansion growth or if they feel like they're more in a stagnation mindset?
So I interviewed, I want to say, with specifically three companies. One of them was a travel company. The other one, I think you've partnered with. They're a really big consultancy. And then this one that I received the offer for is a healthcare company. Consultancy, they were like, we're hiring, 20 people and we're going to just grow, grow, grow. And we want to make sure that we have, plenty of people for customers that want all these specific things, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Obviously that's what you want to hear. And it was kind of the same thing within the healthcare company. So they're growing, but maybe a little bit slower.
Yeah, it's interesting because the business model matters, right? Like where the energy would be like to a customer like a healthcare company, more Salesforce people means more expenses for their
Right.
company, right? Where the consulting company, more Salesforce people means more revenue for their company. So it's totally different visibility or really just like perception of what it means to have more Salesforce people. So that's really interesting. Thank you for that.